Live from New York, we are here with no other than the one, the only, the living legend himself, Jimmy from Brooklyn. Jimmy, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, thank you, and raring to go here.
All right, well, we're looking forward to having you here. And what we're going to do today, folks, is we are exposing the dangerous propaganda from extremist groups to show the public the threat that is posed to our society and our children. We're going to be quoting from a wide variety of publications that the Soviets and the Communists have put out. We're going to be exposing how some folks are affiliated, associated, or funding some of these communist, anti-social or socialist organizations. And, well, there's nobody better in the world to explain this to you, no other than the one, the only, the world-renowned, the living legend, Jimmy from Brooklyn himself. So, Jimmy, where are we going tonight, buddy?
Well, there's so much to talk about here. Let me first say that I've been accused of having very strong opinions, but my opinions are based on fact. So if it's 20 degrees outside, my opinion of that would be it's very cold. And some people may think I'm too explicit, but I try to be very careful here. I frequently talk about a group called the Institute for Policy Studies, which has some sort of strange connection to and follows the policy line, the stated policy line of the Soviet Union and various communist groups. So my opinion is that the Institute for Policy Studies is a very dangerous group, being that the facts show, according to their own publications, that they're involved in so many things going on, things that most American people would be against if they knew it and understood it. And I have some research on the Institute for Policy Studies. We have photographs of known Soviet officials, known KGB agents participating in activities at this group called the Institute for Policy Studies. And this group is immensely important because it helps shape policy in this country. And it's basically, in my opinion, based on facts, it's detrimental to America and the world. But now we have the rise of groups that call themselves socialist. We have conservatives referring to these groups as far left, ultra-liberal, socialist. But when a group is embracing Mao Zedong, a mass murderer, in my opinion, and when a group embraces Leninism and Marxism, I think it's not radical or extreme to refer to people according to what they say. So if a person is a communist, pushes the communist goals and objectives, I think it's pretty safe to say that they are following a communist line. But I also say frequently that I give the benefit of the doubt. Often, a lot of people are misled or otherwise called useful idiots. Those are people who are following something, not realizing what they're getting into. Because to build a mass movement, you have to build it and build a broad coalition of people. So if you were building a mass radical movement, you would have to work specifically with each group. So if you're trying to build a mass movement in a country like America, and the communist press says that's what they're doing. They're saying that for 80 years, 100 years. So when you read a publication from the American Communist Party, in my opinion, the American Communist Party is a communist group. And being that they're a communist group, they're pushing communist objectives. So in this particular publication, The Road to Socialism USA, it's for unity for peace, democracy, jobs, and equality. But it's the program of the Communist Party. So this is the Communist Party pushing objectives under the guise of fighting for peace, democracy, jobs, and equality. But it's also, according to their own writing here, so it's not my opinion, program of the Communist Party USA. So in this publication, without reading all of it, there's too much here, but specific groups that the Communist Party is mentioning working in America, in writing in this publication, They're working among African Americans, Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, American Indians and other indigenous peoples, immigrants, Arabs and Mideast people, Asians and Asian Americans. They're working with the nationally and racially oppressed. They're working among women, youth, students, farmers and rural population. They're working in senior citizens. They're working in social movements for progress. They're working with Jews and against anti-Semitism. They're working to build a progressive culture. They're working in healthcare struggles. They're working in progressive religious movements. They're working for international peace struggles and unity against the ultra-right. So, the Communist Party, this is their publication, they're allowed to call people that don't agree with the communist movement as being the ultra-right. Now, I don't know if the communists calling a mainstream American, if the communists call them ultra-right, I don't know if that's considered hate speech today. It's kind of hard to figure out these movements for censorship here. So you have a Communist Party here. They call themselves Communist Party. They're working in all these groups. I believe it's 20 different groups and movements, and that's just in America. So this is the American Communist Party. But there's according to the communists, there's a Communist Party in every single country around the world. So just as they're working in this country among 20 different groups, they're using the same template to work in every other country. So they say, and so they write. And that's the actual reality. Sometimes when things aren't pleasant, in fact unpleasant, if you were talking about Hitler and what he did, you could be maybe considered hateful or reciting hate speech. But when you have a group that's working for communism and you're against communism, and the group is working in 20 separate groups, maybe not under the title of communist, they're working in movements among these people, but their goal, according to what they write, is to build a mass movement. The ultimate aim, according to Marx in his own writing, is to get control of the means of production. And any child reading this would understand that to get control of the means of production, you have to build a mass movement by getting a broad population to agree with the objectives set out by the Communist Party as written and as stated, and this goes on all around the world. So this is how they build a mass movement under the guise of fighting for unity, for peace, democracy, jobs, and equality. And in the smaller print, it's the program of the Communist Party USA. So for instance here it says, well, first off, Marxists fight the class struggle. The working man in every country, according to Marxist writing and theory, all workers are oppressed and suppressed by the capitalist class who sits back and harvests the money earned by the workers. So the workers are not getting paid their true value. Marx calls it surplus value. So if I pay you $20, $30, $50 an hour to perform a specific job, but I'm getting maybe $20 for each hour you work, and I'm getting, and I have 10 workers, and I'm the boss, I'm the one accumulating money. So in theory, if you're at the lower end, poor, and you feel exploited, the communists will use that. They will organize you, every different group, as I read here, 20 separate groups in America as an example, and the communists will work with each group and tailor their line to get each one of these groups to join the broader movement that the communists call the communist movement. And being that the communists say the communist parties are working in every single country, Lenin's party of a new type, that means, as the communists write, it's the international communist movement. International is the same way as saying world. So it's international communist movement, or as I say, the world communist movement. And this is how the communists could win, because they, in my opinion, when the communists are not being honest the way they're talking to people, it's a form of manipulation. So on the surface, it looks like they're helping each group, and if you're part of that group that maybe feels underpaid, overworked, and not being treated fairly, the communists will offer you a solution for that, And the communists will work to make your condition a little better. But according to the Communist Party's own writing, they do that in order to gain influence. And then eventually all these separate groups are going to realize, they're going to come to their own understanding because of the communist work among them, that they're only going to be truly free, have equality and peace, harmony and love under a socialist system. So some people would describe this as manipulation, taking advantage of people, particularly people in need. But the communists write about getting to winning power through electoral means and voting in communist people and building a communist society through peaceful means. They call it the peaceful revolution for socialism through parliamentary means. There was a Soviet defector who talked about that. Jan Shainer talked about the communists using peaceful means to gain political office in the country, and that's how you take over a country gradually. So when you add this all up, when you read the communist press, including the Soviet press, it boils down to it's a world communist movement. The goal is world communist government. And when you read the step-by-step case study, the way the communists write it, they want to change mass moods, mass thought patterns, and mass trends. They write that they have the ability to move tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of voters. That's called the peaceful transition to socialism. And in Czechoslovakia in 1948, according to the communists, that's what they did in Czechoslovakia. They had a peaceful movement for communism. It was a coalition government, communist and non-communist, in the government of Czechoslovakia in 1948. And the communists, right, little by little, they had pressure in the street, protest, riots. You had extreme, radical, sometimes violent groups at the bottom, street crowds. And you had communists sprinkled throughout the government, according to the communists' own study on it. And basically from the bottom and the communists at the top, they squeezed out the middle, the non-communists, and maybe even some anti-communists that might have somehow been in the government. The president, the Democratic president of Czechoslovakia, according to the communist press, he committed suicide. He jumped out the window, jumped out a window. Other historians, other people that knew him say he was thrown out of the window. So by hook or by crook, by violence or non-violence, the communist ultimate goal is to gain control, and they're working in every country to do this. And it's an absolutely mass movement according to what the communists write. Now let me see if I can find a quote here. Okay, if you remember what I just said, I said a lot there. Now here's a quote. This is from the publication, The Road to Socialism, USA. And this is from the American Communist Party. And again, they work in 20 separate groups, and they're all mentioned in this publication. So here's a quote that kind of sums up part of what I was saying. The struggles for the immediate demands and reforms needed by working people today are essential steps toward our ultimate goals of the revolutionary transformation of society and the economy toward socialism and then communism. The constant battles over issues large and small are where workers learn the lesson that more fundamental changes are necessary and that people need socialism to have a truly humane society. We, the working people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, need socialism, a system based on people's needs, not on corporate greed. So in my sort of preamble here, where I was explaining this, I read you a direct quote, and this is on page 6 in the very beginning of this magazine from the Communist Party. So I don't know how this could be rebutted or how this could be denied. I'm only quoting from the communist publication, and I would say it as the enemy publication, being that they view me as their enemy. Now let me find some more quotes in here. Same publication. All this is normal to the functioning of the capitalist system, but greatly intensified by the dominance of the most reactionary section of the capitalist class. The solution to this ultra-right domination lies in building the broadest, most inclusive unity among our multinational, male-female, multi-generational working class, starting with the labor movement, racially and nationally oppressed people, women and youth. We must unite lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and straight people, professionals and intellectuals, seniors, and the disabled, and the mass people's movements, including the peace, environmental, healthcare, education, housing, and other movements. This all people's front to defeat the ultra-right is in the process of developing, learning, and being tested in giant struggles for peace, to protect social programs and services, to win healthcare for all, and to win control of all three branches of government from the right wing. So clearly, my brief preamble to this publication, and now these two quotes I just read, these two quotes, if we did this like a court of law where you could bring evidence and you could sum up the evidence and come to an obvious conclusion, is what I've done here. These two quotes I just read directly here from this publication makes the case. And this is what's going on. Now let me find some more quotes in here, because some of...
What's the name of this publication again, and when was it published?
This is The Road to Socialism USA, subtitle, Unity for Peace, Democracy, Jobs, and Equality. Very small print under that, Program of the Communist Party USA, and this was published October 16, 2005. So according to the American media, America won the Cold War, we defeated communism. So we defeated communism, but here, 15 years later, or whatever it is, the Communist Party is still working, and it's working in 20 separate groups in America. Now there's more, because it doesn't mention here some of the recent immigrants that came in, but it just shows you. So this is a template. So basically, again, they work in every single identifiable group, whether it's racial, ethnic, economic, sexual orientation, whatever. They work in every single group in America, and they tailor their line, they tailor their program to pull these groups in. Now, some of these groups might be contradictory.
Yeah, but some of these groups that support communism are supported by people like Soros. So we're not saying Soros knows where every penny of his money goes, but some of his money is definitely going to organizations that are supporting communism and socialism.
Well, you see, what's interesting here, the Communist Party is promoting peace, democracy, jobs, and equality. So they're not saying they're fighting for communism. And this publication from the Communist Party is The Road to Socialism. So theoretically, people could be supporting socialism, not thinking or believing it's really communism, or that it could end up as communism. But so basically, socialism is the economics. Marxism is the philosophy. They also call Marxism the science. Socialism is the economics. Communism is the entirety of the whole thing, including useful idiots and people. You could be pulled in to the communist orbit unknowingly. The communists mock those people and call them useful idiots. So the communists build a movement, let's say the environmental movement. Now, they want to save the planet from pollution. They want to keep the water...
And let's specify or clarify for our viewers what a useful idiot is. So, for example, Scott Ritter, who's the guy who is the inspector who is supporting the Communist Party. Now we understand, I think he has a Russian wife. Then he's been called out in Congress for spreading false information and a variety of other things. He's a useful idiot. Colonel McGregor is another useful idiot. These are people who continue to spew the Russian propaganda and don't dispute anything. So a useful idiot is actually that comes from the Russians, right? Isn't that
Right.
the Russians originally came up with the phrase "useful idiot"
Lenin
to
was-
describe stupid Americans that will support their effort. Am I wrong?
No, and calling them stupid is your opinion, and you're entitled to your opinion. And when you have an opinion,
Well, no. That's what the Russians.
Oh, yeah,
actually
yeah,
did.
like
The
useful
Russians.
idiot. Oh,
the
yeah, right,
Russians
right.
actually identified them as stupid Americans multiple times.
Right.
Stupid Americans that are willing to support the Soviet Russian communist cause, no matter what they say, they will repeat it. They're carrying Mother Russia's water.
Well,
And so when I don't know when it was, but maybe you know, when was useful idiot first talked about?
Lenin, all the way back to Lenin, it goes back. There are
So that
probably
was
other
when?
stuff.
19 what?
Like 1920, let's say, take or give.
Okay, so over 100 years, the Russians have been using useful idiots
Right,
in the United
right.
States.
That's
And they're
peop-
still doing it today.
Right, a useful idiot from the communist perspective. So this is not my opinion. This is from the communist perspective. Anybody who helps communism unknowingly is useful to the communist. So he's not a communist, but he's helping communism unknowingly. So he's an idiot by most definition, but he's a useful idiot from the communist perspective. And that you could say most people don't realize what they're doing. I try to give the benefit of the
Well, that's
doubt.
because they're idiots.
Well, that's you're entitled to your opinion.
Well, no,
Sometimes
that's
opinion-
according to the
I know,
Russians.
but there's a question now about opinion. Other people dispute it. This is why I form my opinions from reading The Enemy. Oh, it's my opinion they're the enemy, being the history is they killed millions and millions of people. And we know their involvement in various terrorist groups. We know all of that. We know how the American Communist Party is involved in a lot of serious stuff. I've been involved with them a long time. We know you've got groups like the Revolutionary Communist Party in their own publication, writes in their own publication, this was from a few years ago, talking about last Saturday, but this was written several years ago. 25 people shot in Chicago. You have to quit. They write, this is a direct quote from the communist press. You have to quit killing each other. You have to get out of the street and into the revolution. There are better things to fight and die for. So reading that...
And that was written when?
That was written, roughly 6 years ago in a newspaper called Revolution, published by the Revolutionary Communist Party.
And if we've got that document, can find it, we'll also post that later.
I don't have it now handy here.
No, but I can research
right.
it or
I
get the
have a
AA out
lot
of
of
here to look
stuff
it up.
packed away. I had a flood in my apartment. I had to
Yep.
pack
We got you
stuff and
covered.
move it out. And in that same publication, they talk about funding. One of the publications from the Revolutionary Communist Party is let me see, Global Exchange, Revolutionary Communist Party Literature Fund. That's fundraising to raise money to get these communist publications who are telling people to quit killing each other and to get into the revolution, okay? So they're not saying quit killing, they're saying quit killing each other. And being that they're publishing these publications and getting them into prisons. Now, what could go wrong with that? Well, if you read what the communists are writing, they're telling the people in Chicago to quit killing each other. Not to quit killing each other. In other words, they're trying to build maybe useful idiots who are violent and armed. That's what it looks like, in my opinion, okay? So if you get this radical literature into prisons, and again, 20 groups, Puerto Rican, Mexican Americans, poor, racially oppressed, youth, students, transgender, all of these 20 groups I mentioned, and they're in prison, they're going to be flooded with this violent literature pushing Marxist theory and Marxist ideology. And we know from the communist movement, the riots, we know from the revolutions around the world, we know the connections to terror because they publish their opinions on terrorism, that this is very dangerous. And they write that a well-known philanthropist, maybe a useful idiot, sends money to a group called Global Exchange, and Global Exchange transmits some of that money to Prisoner Revolutionary Literature Fund. So this billionaire philanthropist, maybe a useful idiot. Basically, his money is going to put radical, extreme, violent literature into the prisons. Now, that sounds pretty dangerous. People in prison, some of them are economic crimes, some of them might be petty crimes, shoplifting. I doubt they're in prison today for shoplifting. But you get a lot of violent people in prison. Prison life is hard from what I hear. I used to work with ex-convicts. You could go in prison and come out really angry, maybe crazy, extremely violent. And if you tie that anger, that hate, that hurt, and meanwhile you're being fed radical literature from a group called the Revolutionary Communist Party, and then they come out of prison, still violent, only now they're Marxist-Leninist fighting for revolution. Their publication is called Revolution, and the group is the Revolutionary Communist Party. Now, some people may think it's a fringe group, but anybody working to that, like, as I said here, you have 20 different groups, the communists right they're working in. So you have, according to Lenin, Lenin's party of a new type. Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union.
I got a question for you, Jimmy. Somebody is asking, when politicians say our democracy, they're meaning communism. Is this a correlation, if I'm understanding correctly? Nick, what I will tell you is anyone who says our democracy is not pro-America. What say you, Jimmy?
Or maybe misinformed. We're a republic or a democratic republic. But let me give you that. See,
but to say our democracy is 100% at accuracy, because we are not a democracy.
Right. Well, that could be a person who doesn't know he's misinformed.
Well, no, but there's a lot of people who say that who are highly informed. That's right. The issue.
That's when the communist says it. The communist definition of democracy in writing. Democracy is ruled by the people. That sounds good.
Correct.
And then, wait. It goes on and then says right after that, and the people are represented by their communist party. So when you read that, obviously, democracy means communism to a communist. So a communist, now they're openly talking about communism and socialism, but in the past they were talking democracy. And anybody who's in the way of the communist movement is called radical right. So
but anybody that knows, any politician that says our democracy is not supporting the United States, because we are not a democracy. And if they are an elected official, they absolutely know that we are not a democracy. And so they are supporting something other than the United States.
Well, they know democracy sounds good. It sounds safe.
What it sounds like and what it means. I think any politician knows what it means.
Well, I hope they would know, but with the way the schools are today, a person...
Well, they're elected, so...
Well, you're assuming, though. You're assuming that they know.
No, I'm not assuming. I'm just saying that that's... You would think. One would think.
Right.
I don't assume anything, because all that does is makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, either way you look at it, we're in big trouble because the words don't have the same meaning. Just like we have a peace treaty with a communist country, we don't even agree on the term peace. Peace to us means like there's no open battle. People are generally safe and free and not feeling, overly threatened. Generally like we're sitting here right now, wherever America right now, in America, we're kind of in peace, even though we have all these violent movements going on. To a communist, you only achieve peace when communist victory. It's communist victory that brings peace. And communist victory brings democracy. Democracy is ruled by the people, and the people are represented by their communist party. So they have a magic trick with words. They use words where there's a little bit of plausible deniability there, where it has different meanings. When Bill Clinton was being questioned, I think it was about his alleged affair with Monica Lewinsky, he questioned what the definition of is. So we can't even agree on basic, simple words. How could you make a treaty? How could you have a contract with somebody? How could you have a contract, whether you're a builder or whatever? You have an agreement, a contract, if you can't agree on what the basic words mean. This is how the communists work. If you read the communist writing, it's very manipulative. But there's a certain logic to the communist writing and stuff. It's just not our logic. Now there's more quotes in here. The same communist publication. 20 different groups that work in American Communist Party fighting for socialism. This is from 2005. When the strategic goal of a major defeat for the ultra-right has been achieved, shifting the balance of forces, the focus of the class and democratic struggle shifts to the goal of radically curbing the power of the transnationals as a whole. Talking about the corporations. In this stage, the entire transnational capitalist class is the main enemy, and all sections of transnational capitalism are opponents. This coalition will work to build a mass people's party free from any domination by any monopolies, which has the goal of winning a government free of monopoly control. The party, meaning the Communist Party, working through the Democrat Party, the party will work to achieve mass size and influence as part of building this advanced anti-monopoly level of struggle. The party, helping to prepare the next phase of struggle, will conduct wider agitation and propaganda for socialism. So here's one of the problems we have now. When the Soviet Union collapsed, allegedly, the conservatives kept saying we defeated communism. So we defeated communism, that put people to sleep. We never really had a real strong, knowledgeable anti-communist movement in America. We had people who were anti-communist and knowledgeable, but history today teaches America on a broad way to dislike, distrust, or even hate these people that were anti-communist. But in the communist publications, they complain about tens of thousands of communist activists rounded up in America and being deported. So the communists at one hand claimed that there's no communist trouble, there's no communist conspiracy, it's a peaceful movement for socialism. But socialism is the economics. So people today, largely because of the Soviet Union's alleged collapse, because of that, the ignorant people on the conservative side, from the so-called alleged collapse of the Soviet communism, the conservatives here say we defeated communism. So in the writings of the Soviets, Gorbachev took away the image of the enemy, not the enemy, the image. In other words, the understanding and belief in and knowledge of the enemy was taken away. The hardline anti-communists who understood it better, most of them died off, years passed. So it looked like there was no communism, but what the communists were doing after the so-called collapse of the Soviet communism, they weren't pushing openly communism, they were pushing socialism. So the American Communist Party in writing was writing about and pushing Bill of Rights socialism, meaning socialism without the threat of dictatorship or communism. And then you have the Democratic Socialist of America. That sounds like socialism, like people say Sweden, Norway, you know, the Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries. But those countries had capitalism heavily taxed. So they had companies and corporations who were making money, but they were heavily taxed. So that might not be socialist, but maybe you could call it socialistic or the welfare state. But the Soviets, in their writing, took away the image of the enemy, the communist threat. So here the Communist Party is pushing for socialism. So pushing for Bill of Rights socialism, democratic socialism, and here the road to socialism. So people don't see this as threatening as they may have if this was openly known and talked about as communism. Now remember, democracy is ruled by the people and the people are represented by their Communist Party. The communists say Marxism, Leninism is the most democratic form of governance. So this is a trick. So I could say or believe, give the benefit of the doubt, many, maybe even most of the people falling into this propaganda, those people, if they're unknowingly pushing the communist line, those people would be called useful idiots. Useful to the communists, but idiots because they don't know it. So when you read all of these quotes here, so people might think my opinions are wrong, they're tough, they're extreme, but my opinions are based on fact, and the fact is written in the communist publications. So if I quote the Communist Party or communists directly, people can't argue with me. Go back and argue with the communists, argue with Lenin, argue with Marx, argue with Mao, all the previous communists who have mass followings in America today. When you have a guy like Piker, who's a Maoist, and he wears the Mao uniform and openly praises communism and says we deserved 9/11, if I call that guy dangerous or say he's a communist, people could not like my opinion that a communist dressing as a communist, pushing the communist line, that old saying, if you walk like a duck, quack like a duck, have feathers like a duck, you must be a duck. Well, these people are quacking all over the place. I mean, this communism is alive. And now the communists are openly talking about it. And now you have a lot of the Democratic Socialists of America and a lot of the Democrat, so-called traditional Democrat Party people looking like they're kind of, well, we're not against the police. We're not against law enforcement. A communist or anybody who deviously wants to get control, sometimes they have to shade or lie about what they are. Because the general population, as misinformed and ill-informed and uninformed as they are, sometimes things are so obvious. When a guy has his fist up in the air in the Communist Revolutionary Salute, wearing a Maoist shirt saying we deserve the attack by the radical Islamists on 9/11, when a guy is praising Mao, meeting with other communists, and they have the hammer and sickle flag when they're rioting and protesting, I don't think it's questionable to say that person is a communist. I mean, if a guy is wearing a swastika and has the Nazi salute, has a picture of Hitler in his room, I think saying this guy, maybe not a Nazi, but a fascist, I don't think that's extreme. I mean, if you're coughing a lot and spitting up phlegm and a doctor says you may have a cold, I don't think that doctor is extreme or radical. I think he's using his knowledge to make a basic observation of reality. Today, people question reality. People question reality. The idea whether we defeated communism or not, if you defeat something, it's like those horror movies. Freddy Krueger was a monster-like guy you couldn't kill. You killed him, he comes back to life. Freddy Krueger. I think there was a guy, Jason. So you could defeat a communist or a communist movement somewhere. It doesn't mean you defeated communism. Because like now, a lot of these communists running for office, let's say they don't get elected. The conservatives will say we defeated communism. No, those communists are still alive. They're still there doing their work. Because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I said previously in one of these presentations, on a real foggy day, you could be on the bridge and you can't see 3 cars ahead of you. You can't see the ocean or the river below you. If you're in an airplane flying in the clouds, you can't see the mountains. You can't see the stars because you're in a fog, you're in a cloud, or you're in smoke. The fact that you can't see it doesn't prove there's nothing there. Simply because you don't see it, maybe you need a key to see it. You need a key to understanding what you're looking at. When you look at the old maps and you had a key, I remember as a kid in 3rd grade, we were learning how to read maps. And at the bottom was something called the key, and every 1/4 inch might have been 1,000 miles, whatever it was. You need the key. You need the combination to open the combination lock. You need a key to open the lock. So I'm talking here, explaining communism from my study of communism. Not reading anti-communist publications, not hearing other anti-communists speak. I mean, occasionally I hear that, but I don't quote it or repeat it or even believe it until I see it for myself among the communists and communist publications. So most of what I learned, I was self-taught almost entirely from reading communist publications and Soviet publications. Now the communists work on different levels. When they're trying to get people in the beginning, it has a softer tone. It's talking against racism and it's talking against pollution. But I read you direct quotes here. That's only the beginning. That's like the opening line. If a guy is a con artist or a dangerous person, most of the time they don't confront you honestly and grab you, threaten you. Usually it's a peaceful thing. It's a gradual process. Everything is a process. You're born, you roll over, the family applauds. You're first being able to stand, everybody claps. It's a beautiful thing. Your baby could stand. First step, eventually the baby's running. Years later, they're running in a track meet or playing baseball, football, soccer. Everything's a process. So the communists write, they describe how they work. I read you here the quotes from this publication. So we defeated communism, meaning there's no socialist, communist, Marxist threat. So the communists then push socialism. Democratic socialism doesn't sound scary. And Bill of Rights socialism. So they took away the image or the threat from the enemy. And now the enemy is openly out there. Putin was head of the KGB. You can't be any more communist, in my opinion, allegedly, you can't be any more communist than being head of the KGB. If there's a known mafia king, godfather, a known communist mafia leader, whether Italian mafia, Jewish mafia, Irish, whatever, Russian mafia, if you're a leader of it, in my opinion, if you're a leader of an organized crime group, in my opinion, I would think that person might be a criminal. Today, you're not allowed to make those normal conclusions, those normal understanding of what you're looking at. You don't need somebody to interpret for you when you're reading the enemy actually saying these things. And I have these publications. Now, this group, the Institute for Policy Studies, when you see the pictures of known KGB agents in there, and when you see the policies they're pushing, when you see how they're active in the peace movement, and the peace movement works to weaken America's military power, at the same time the enemy, the alleged enemy's military power is building and growing. So the enemy will work to weaken or disarm our side while their side is getting stronger. Now, in Lenin's writing, the founder of the Soviet Union, the Soviet revolutionary, he wrote about peaceful coexistence. Now, to people, that sounds good. For people that are like childlike innocence and naivete, peaceful coexistence, how could you be against that? We're going to live peacefully. We're going to coexist together. But in Soviet and communist publications, they go into further detail. So peaceful coexistence is necessary for Soviet victory. Under peaceful coexistence, the necessary requirements and prerequisites for socialism are set. We're not going to settle our differences through any violence, so that's peaceful. But that strengthens the ability of the socialist and communist parties in the capitalist countries to make mass movements, again in America, working among 20 different groups. So this will be the peaceful, the ultimate goal is the peaceful transition to socialism through parliamentary means. The well-known, the most important Soviet defector, allegedly, in my opinion, was Anatoly Golitsyn. He wrote New Lies for Old and the Perestroika Deception. His analysis from the same documents I read, when the Soviets talked peaceful coexistence, so through peaceful means, the communists are going to gain strength by working in all these different groups. In America, 20 groups they talk about. They're going to gain influence in these groups. The ultimate goal is to get these people to embrace socialism. Not communism per se, but socialism. And when they get in power little by little, like they did in Czechoslovakia in 1940 out, they're going to squeeze out the people who are moderates, more mainstream, maybe liberal, maybe a little on the left. They're going to squeeze them out and end up ultimately with a communist dictatorship. This is not only the historical fact, the historical truth. This is written about by communists. They write it. When a communist says something, it doesn't mean you have to believe it, because communists also lie. But when the communists write what they're doing and they give a definition of it, where they describe it, and then years later you see their description coming out right in front of your face, that can't be denied. In a courtroom, this would be called evidence. And then, of course, the communists, the pro-communists, the useful idiots could testify against it. So they bring their evidence, I bring my evidence. My evidence overwhelms whatever evidence they have, because we have history backing it up, we have communists backing it up, we have communists, pro-communists writing about it, praising their success. There's no way we would lose this debate. The only reason that the House Committees on Un-American Activities and the laws against communism, the only reason those were closed down, the power and an influence of the communists overwhelmed the anti-communist. In the early days, the communists were more open about violent revolution. They wrote about it and pushed it. So the communists then started pushing the peaceful transition to socialism. Therefore, you can't call communism as a dangerous, violent threat, because they talk about democratic socialism, Bill of Rights socialism, and they write about the peaceful transition to socialism through parliamentary means, meaning peaceful coexistence. We're not going to have open armed combat. We're going to have political, social, cultural, and economic combat. That also is in communist publications. The battle is social, cultural, political, economic. Through gaining influence in that or control of that, they could win seats in office, they could run for office, gain a majority in the House and Senate, gain the presidency. To get that, you need influence or control of the media, the schools, the culture, economics, social policy, cultural policy, education. The communist right, in my opinion, this is valuable. Allegedly, in writing, they write, we have the ability to move tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of voters. We work to change mass moods and mass thought patterns, and we have the ability to do it. When you add that all up, and then you come up to today, what do we have today? We have people running as democratic socialists. We have open communists working with them. You have the Gus Hall faction of the Communist Party united now with the breakaway faction. So now you have the American Communist Party writing these publications. All the Marxists, all the communists are working together. Now, among them, you may have people who think they're using the communist. No, people don't use the communist. Ultimately, the communists are the ones that end up being the victor. They're the ones who are manipulating. But that's how that term the useful idiot came into being. When you make a mass movement, just like a coalition, among the conservatives you have coalition. You have people mainly concerned with stopping abortion. You have other people mainly concerned with the free market. You have other people concerned with social, cultural, economic, political issues among conservatives. So these are different groups, different people in the groups. That's how the communists have a similar thing, only it's opposite everything the conservatives want. So the communists, they write social, cultural, political, economic, that's the warfare. That would fall under the Leninist term peaceful coexistence. So they wage that battle without open armed conflict. But they do have riots. They're not against violence. What they're against is anti-communist violence, anti-communist military. They're against their opposition. So they have a way of pushing their line, their goal, and as they're doing that simultaneously, they're weakening their opponents by calling them fascists, Nazis, racist, homophobes, polluters, right-wing nuts, dangerous threat. So the communists work on both sides. So when you have communist groups, or you have this group in America, Southern Poverty Law Center, that was funding neo-Nazi and Ku Klux Klan groups. Now the stupid, ignorant conservatives, see the conservatives who don't understand what I'm talking about, those conservatives would fall under the title useful idiots, because unbeknownst to them, they're helping the communist movement without knowing it. So when you hear conservatives say we defeated communism, when you hear conservatives say Reagan defeated communism, when you hear conservatives say that we should arm the Iranians the way we armed the anti-communists in Nicaragua and Afghanistan, those conservatives saying that would be considered useful idiots by the communists. because they're actually helping the communist cause. We did not defeat the communists in Nicaragua, and the communists and radical Islamists have control of Afghanistan. So we have useful idiots among the conservative side. And this is why I've been railing against the conservative media celebrities, because they kept saying we defeated communism. Now they're writing, now they're complaining. Hannity is talking now about communists running for office. But the conservatives, for the most part, are still laughing about this, meaning they're still useful idiots. How do you talk about a alleged communist threat? The reason I say allegedly, because they killed allegedly from 100 to 100 million people. Now, some places we're not allowed to talk about that. Sometimes the truth is controversial. Sometimes the truth could sound extreme. But we can't ignore and deny reality. I guess we could deny it and ignore it, but you can't deny or ignore the impact it's having or it's going to have. The enemy knows. They call America enemy number one. The radical Islam calls America the big Satan, Israel's the little Satan. So the broader communist movement, American Communist, Soviet, the world movement, all of them know and say and write, America is enemy number one. America is led by fascist Nazis, all kind of right-wing nuts. And the Southern Poverty Law Center helps that case, the illusion, by funding neo-Nazi and Ku Klux Klan groups in America. So that's how the communists could work on both sides. They work on one side to weaken it, to weaken support for it, to weaken love of America, support of America. So you have to weaken the targeted groups in America. And you do that by uniting these 20 disparate groups I read here earlier, these 20 different groups. So they discredit what they call the right wing, and it builds the left wing. But the left wing is not a communist threat because Gorbachev took away the image of the enemy. So this sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo. When you hear a con artist trying to swindle somebody out of money, the target sometimes doesn't realize what's going on. But if you're standing nearby or it's somebody you know and you hear it, you might be able to see that this person is being fooled. This person, the target, is being deceived. Now, if you tell the target that you're being a victim here, that person may not believe it. And the person targeting them could tell that person, don't trust this guy who's telling you this. He's trying to screw up our business deal. That's the same way a con artist works. It's manipulation and deception. The end goal of a con artist is to gain your money, to gain something from you, to take something or gain something from you. That's the goal of a con artist. Communists work in a similar way. They have to defeat you. And if it's going to be peaceful, they have to use a lot of deception. Socialism doesn't sound as bad as communism, especially democratic socialism and Bill of Rights socialism. It's all manipulation. But now you have a massive armed militant communist movement in the world. The influence they had in America with the riots. They have the ability to riot in every city. They attack the police. They're calling now for disbanding the police, disbanding ICE, opening the borders, giving citizenship to everybody here. But there was a woman, a radical left woman, following the entire Communist Party line, says we're going to get the changes we want, largely through minorities and immigration. And then mysteriously, a mysterious virus comes from an alleged communist country, in my opinion, because it's called Communist China. A virus comes from that country. It came here. It changed how we vote. Now, what else did that virus do? Maybe these are coincidences. In communist history, strategy, and tactics, they talk about and write about a general strike. A general strike is when the influence of the communists working through unions and wherever they else have influence close everything down, close business down, close transportation down, factories, shops, close everything down, lock everything down. That's called a general strike. Now, that was usually done to show the power of the left. The idea was to show the working people their power politically. They're able to close down the whole economic system. Well, that virus that allegedly came from China got to this country, and that basically was implemented here, a general strike. Under the guise, or maybe it's a coincidence, because the virus was viewed as deadly. So the communists work, when I was doing work among some of my Christian friends years ago, and I was explaining the communist threat, showing the communist documents, some of my good conservative Christian friends weren't worried because God is going to intervene in their belief. And when I question that, they say the Lord works in strange and mysterious ways. And I said, so does the freaking KGB. And I'm not comparing the KGB, of course, to the Lord, but the idea of working in strange and mysterious ways. Most people can't comprehend the power and influence of the communist movement in America. And a lot of that influence is being implemented and growing by useful idiots, people who are doing it without knowing they're under the influence, manipulation, or control of the communist movement. Around 1960, an excellent movie was made, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now just think about that, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So in today's circumstance, and I have a friend, a personal, I haven't seen this guy recently. I had a friend who had a kid, normal, healthy, happy, well-adjusted, normal American Christian kid. The kid came from college, totally changed. So it was the same body, but inside was changed. That movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that was hinting at, allegedly, how the communists could get control of people without the people knowing it. So in the movie, you could see a family, and all of a sudden your uncle or your brother is the same person, the same body, same name, same identity, but totally different on the inside. That's the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That was supposedly from another planet. It came in and their being got into a human form. So your brother who you knew and loved, your sister, your wife, your brother, your kids, whatever, according to that movie, the same people, something got inside of them. In the movie, it was like a monster horror movie where it was something from another planet came and they got into human bodies, but people you know. Well, that's kind of what's happening today when your kid goes off to college, comes back 2 or 4 years later, totally different. It's the same person on the outside, the same body, name, identity, but totally changed. That movie, allegedly, was trying to warn people how the communists work. And it's a funny coincidence how accurate, in my opinion, allegedly, it is, because you see today how people come out of college totally changed. You look at New York, Mandami's strong vote, he got a lot of strong vote among minorities. He got 1/3 of the Jewish vote, even though this guy, by any wet measure, is anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. Mandami has support of people with known groups, radical, extreme, dangerous groups, allegedly. And yet, Mandami got elected, allegedly, and with his extreme views, and now they're trying to tone it down, because now the Republicans are starting to talk about a communist threat and communists running for office. So now you have far-left Democrats, which were called mainstream Democrats, are now trying to distance themselves from communists and communism. So the stupid conservatives, the useful idiots among the conservatives, talk about the moderate Democrats versus the extreme Democrats. That's the wrong interpretation. The Democrat Party today, the extreme Democrats are the mainstream Democrats, and then the ones more extreme than that are the communist Democrats. The whole political spectrum has been moved so far to left, people don't realize it because it's a process. Yesterday's left is today's center. Today's left will be tomorrow's center. That idea and that writing is throughout communist literature. So what used to be a moderate today would be called a right-winger. This is why I say, in my opinion, allegedly, JFK could not be a Democrat today. Now, I don't know how anybody could dispute that. I guess you could dispute anything. Some people dispute whether the world is round, whether gravity works. So people could dispute anything, but you got to have some knowledge, some sense of reality sometimes to see the truth. Now, sometimes you need the key to understand the truth. I don't understand how radar picks up something 100 miles away. I know it happens, but my brain does not have the ability. But there are people that do.
It will. I'll explain that to you.
Okay. Oh, yeah. When I want to learn about technology and all this high-tech stuff, I got to go to Lee. Lee is the go-to guy, and we're going to have a good conversation about this. Now, some people told me my mind closes up on this stuff. Maybe it does.
Okay, do you know how a bat sees where a bug is?
Right.
Radar's the same thing. It just uses electromagnetic waves. And if it wants a better image of it, it uses multispectral. So in other words, it'd be like instead of a single tone that the bat puts out,
okay,
it would be a chirp that changes frequency.
Are they hearing this?
Yeah, absolutely, they should be.
Okay, okay.
Let me look right here and see to make sure. Yep, I'm on. So
okay. Now, what Lee just said makes perfect sense to him. It still doesn't make perfect sense to me.
Okay.
I want to use this analogy here.
Okay.
The same way what Lee says makes perfect sense to him and maybe everybody listening, but not to me, is the same way when I talk about communism, that doesn't make sense to people who hear me. It doesn't mean it's not true because they don't understand it. But
okay,
what I'm talking about is a lot simpler than technology because this is simple stuff in writing. What I can't understand is how could a camera take a picture of something on the moon and transmit it down here? I know if I throw a baseball, you catch it in your glove. So I could see the ball leaving me and going to you, and you catch it in the mitt. Now, the idea that some electronic picture could go through the air, you can't see it, and then there's like a radar system or a dish that picks it up. I know it happens, I just can't understand it. I know how gravity works. I know what a magnet could do. You can't see magnetism. You could see the result of a magnet, but you can't see the way the magnet has. Wait, I got another analogy. The way the magnet has a power you can't see, but you can see the results of it. That's how communism is. Sometimes you can't see it, but you see the results of their operations. This is why when I talk about what's going on with the children today, a lot of this destructiveness, when we're considered to be enemy number one in writing by the enemy, and then that said enemy allegedly is implementing things that are causing the results they want, that's not an accident. So maybe my mind is closed to this technology stuff, and I know I have a hard time with it, but that's not my job. I have people to rely on for that. Now, the people who don't understand the communist stuff, the way I rely on Lee for any of this stuff, it's past modern. A lot of this stuff was already old, but to me it's still, I don't understand it. So I go to Lee, I defer to Lee, he's my go-to guy. Now the people who don't pay attention to politics and national security or threat assessment, they go to the experts. Now what do you do when the experts don't know what they're doing? The experts on security, national security and threat assessment, when they're clueless, you're in real trouble. You are in real trouble. This is like if I was put in charge of NASA, we would be in trouble. Well, I'm not in charge of NASA, but as ignorant I am on this technology, that same level of ignorance, the people at that same level of ignorance are in charge of national security and threat assessment. All those years they kept saying we defeated communism, they don't know it, but they were useful idiots. They were helping the communist cause. When the communists said they're going to put the enemy to sleep and then crush them with their clenched fist, they put the conservatives to sleep, and now the conservatives are warning about the communist threat. They weren't warning about it 3 months ago, 5 months ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago. They kept saying we defeated communism. And now they wake up and shazam, there is allegedly a communist threat. Allegedly into the communist writing. People don't pay attention. So the same way I defer to Lee, and he could probably help me with it, is the way I, Lee, Trevor, Bill Jasper, Nyquist, Johnny in Germany, the same way we, they, all of us that I just mentioned, we could help the broader public understand communism. All of us have a little bit, maybe a little bit expertise in one particular part of it. When you put it all together, I think we pretty much have everything covered, or almost everything. Now, obviously, I left out a lot of names. I don't know everybody who's knowledgeable, but I think among this little sort of loose, very loose coalition we have here, we have the ability, I think, to make a good presentation, whether through the media, at public events, on the stage. We could bring it out to the broader masses if we have access. I know most of the media platforms and outlets don't allow this type of work. There's strict censorship under the guise of different rules and regulations. that we can't even imagine a doctor who can't talk about health to a patient. Imagine a doctor that can't talk about health to a patient. The doctor maybe would know a remedy, but it's not considered acceptable. So the person will have to go to for that remedy to a foreign country, or maybe some quack somewhere with some false remedy. We need to be able to talk freely and openly, especially when you have documentation to prove it, and you could handle any question, any outburst against us. We can handle all of that. We just need to be able to present it to the public. I mean, we talk about free market. There should be a free market of ideas. But the left has influence in areas they shouldn't. How can we have a free market of ideas if we have to be careful how we describe what the enemy's doing? It makes no sense to my logic. But to the communist logic, it makes perfect sense. That's a way where the communists exert influence beyond their borders, beyond their ideology. They make it safe for communism. Today, you wear a Trump hat somewhere, or you fly an American flag, you could be attacked. When we had these tornadoes and hurricanes down south and other places where there were houses collapsing into the water and people dying and drowning, FEMA did not help people that had Trump flags. Now it just shows you the influence of the people who any normal person would assume had to be the enemy, because it's hard. I know there are useful idiots and there are a lot of stupid people. But when people are stupid to the effect that they're having a negative impact on masses of people, is that stupidity or is that something on purpose? Well, it's probably a combination of all of it. But if we can't point out the problem, there's no way we could work to correct the problem. So if we can't have open dialogue based on fact and then analyze those facts, I realize you could look at something, that old saying, if you lie under an elephant and you're looking up at it, lying on your back, the elephant looks different than if you're sitting on top of the elephant looking down. I understand that. So sometimes there would be, somebody might, let's say somebody disputes something I'm saying or my opinion of a fact I'm presenting. They may have another fact that may change my opinion on the fact I looked at. Sometimes it could be two different facts that don't coincide. It doesn't mean the two facts are not real facts, just that sometimes one fact might outweigh the other fact. I mean, if you break into a building, you break a lock, you break into an apartment, that's against the law, that's a crime. So the fact is you broke in. So theoretically you'd be arrested, you go on trial. But there could be a fact that counteracts that fact. The building's on fire and somebody's screaming for help. That's why you broke in illegally and entered, to save somebody. So the fact that you broke in, that's a fact. Theoretically, you could be arrested. But then the counter fact, the more important fact, is why you broke in. You broke in to save somebody from a fire. So there are cases where a fact could be presented in a trial or a hearing that counteracts or counteramposes the other fact. But I'm very careful the way I talk. I try to be careful. I really try to give the benefit of the doubt. But when somebody's wearing a Mao shirt, puts their fist up in the air, calls for Marxist revolution, has a picture of Lenin in their house, the hammer and sickle flag, I think it's a normal assumption that the guy got to be a communist or woman or LGBTQ, allegedly. This is the quandary we're in. We got to be extremely careful how we talk. We may offend somebody. Where free speech is supposed to allow things that offend people. I'm offended when people talk about destroying America. I'm offended when people threaten America. I'm offended when people talk negatively about America and overemphasize the bad parts of America. I use another analogy here. Years ago, my little clique of friends, the outer reaches of it, we had a friend or somebody we knew that was a bodybuilder. Had a perfect body. All of us wish our body was like that. We weren't going to work out 4 or 5 hours a day like he did, or take steroids like he may have. But meanwhile, that guy that we thought looked really good, the guys want to look like that, that guy was not happy. He'd look in the mirror, he'd mention a muscle I never heard of that is not developed enough. That guy always found something wrong with a body that we thought was perfect, or a girl, perfect body. A girl may think this is wrong, I wish this was better. You could always nitpick and find little things that are wrong, but if you look at America overall, we're still the best country, we were the best country, we're still the best country, we could still remain the best country. When people point out whatever was wrong in the early years of America, we don't deny that, we don't harp on it. We don't harp on it. We have here now, they don't celebrate Columbus Day in New York, they celebrate Indigenous People Day. So when I got confronted by a couple of American Indians or indigenous people, and they questioned me about what happened to the Indians, and I mentioned, well, indigenous people, that means now we don't celebrate the colonizers, we don't celebrate the Europeans that came here, but we celebrate the indigenous people, the warriors, the slave owners, and the cannibals who were here before the Europeans came. Now that fact counterposes or counteracts the negative fact about America. All countries had war, all countries had slavery. America officially put it to end, went to war to end it. Europe ended it officially. They even had ships trying to block. Today you still have slavery in Africa. There's still Muslim countries that have slavery. And yet the left doesn't talk about that because the slavery issue is only meant to have a negative impact on America's security. In my opinion, allegedly. So if you only point out the negative points, you don't see the good points. And America's the freest country. This is the only country people would die to get here. They'll swim through shark-infested waters. Now, in the old days, people came here, they were glad to be here. Now we get millions of people coming here, and they're not happy here. They want to change us. That's the impact, allegedly, of the communist movement. Open the borders, flood the country with people that are going to vote Democrat Party. So I hope I explained enough here. There was a lot I didn't get to yet. I don't know how much more time, if I have any left.
You have all the time in the world, dude. You can talk all night.
Can I get a light here? Can I get a light?
Yeah. How many lights do you want? Let's go with
anyone I could read this.
Okay. Now, also, before you end, I want to do a live question and answer session. So I'll bring you the phone. And
you want to do that now in case there's enough people?
We can do it now. We can do it now, and then we can go back to that.
Okay, let me finish this here.
Okay.
Now I talk about this group often, the Institute for Policy Studies. I refer to it as tax-exempt KGB front group. Now, why do I call it a KGB front group? Well, they have known KGB agents frequent the place. It helps shape policy and opinion, and the policy and opinion seems to coincide with the stated opinion of the Soviet Union and other various communist countries. So research done on the Institute for Policy Studies, I have 2 pages here. It shows you the Institute for Policy Studies and the peace movement. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There's about 25 different groups that this group, the Institute for Policy, works with. Then I have another 2-page here, the Institute for Policy Studies and their campaign against corporation. So this is against the business. This is 2, 4, 6, 8. This is like 15 or 16 different groups that the Institute for Policy Studies is working against. And it's showing the groups that are working to stop America's capitalist system. Then another page here, Institute for Policy Studies and the Latin Network. This is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So the Institute for Policy Studies is working among 12 different groups that have influence on policy in Latin America. So they're supporting Castro, they're supporting the revolutions in these Latin American countries. They're working here against major corporations, particularly the big ones, the powerful ones, the ones that will have the biggest negative impact if they go out of business. And then the Institute for Policy Studies and the peace movement. The peace movement, you have the World Peace Council, which was set up by the Soviets. The World Peace Council works to limit America's military and American military power and influence. So the Soviets and the Communist Party and the Soviets both write and say that they are not pacifist, but they push pacifism in our country. This is interesting, is it? So if one person is going to assault another person, the person doing the assault could have his friend hold the arms of the person, the target that's being assaulted. So the person holding the arms of the target, that guy will be making peace. He's preventing that target from fighting back. But the guy that's doing the attack will have his partner hold the guy back from defending himself. So that's a good example of how the communists work. They build a peace movement in a target country. At the same time, they are planning major attack, political, social, cultural, economic. But the communists and Soviets also write, the capitalists will never give up power willingly, knowingly, peacefully. Therefore, we can't denounce or limit the potential for armed military conflict. So here you have the communists pushing coexistence as a way to defeat us through parliament means get people elected. The image of the communists unleash basically the communists. That's achieved. Now, the flag on his tanks he sent to Europe, putting statues of be a communist, maybe not. Putting up statues of Lenin, Stalin, well, he could be a communist, allegedly. Well, this is how it works. Everything is alleged. Until you're convicted in a court of law, you're allegedly guilty. But sometimes you got to use common sense. So the trouble we're in now, I've been exposing it on the radio for, I don't know, I think it's more than 35 years, maybe 40, at least 35, 36 years. I have the documents to prove it. You've got the terrorist movement around the world. Now, if I could find it here, the Communist Party describes terrorism, and they basically defend it under the right circumstances. I think I covered this here in one of my presentations, and I don't know if I brought that with me now. I'm still very disorganized. I had to move a lot of stuff. I moved from where I live, and I got my important stuff stored away in various places for safety reasons and precautionary measures. But in the American Communist Party publication, they write that Lenin denounced terrorism because it could hurt the peaceful revolution. But they also say in a country like America, the horrors of slavery, the horrors of Jim Crow and racism, the murder in Vietnam, anything that stops that is moral, just, and required. So they support terror. And that's the way they deny it. So any terror they do it because we resist the communist advance. So the communists write for peaceful transition to socialism, i.e. communism. But they write that the capitalist class will never give up power, therefore we have to resort to maybe more militant means. So they denounce terror, but they support terror. They denounce war, but they support war. They denounced the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis, but the Southern Poverty Law Center was funding those groups. Now, what the Southern Poverty Law Center did is something the communists have done in the past. Communists in the past, decades ago, secretly, very secretly, were working with the Ku Klux Klan. So the Ku Klux Klan, in this case, I guess, were useful idiots. And the reason the left, the communists, the liberals, allegedly, the reason they fund these radical right-wing groups, they have to have the constant illusion of a right-wing threat. If everybody's only looking at the threat from the right, they don't see the threat from the left. So if the communists, socialists, liberals, whatever you want to call them, if they're funding radical, dangerous right-wing groups, it makes, by contrast, the real radical, the left, the communist, they look like the peacemakers fighting for peace. We're the right-wing threat. They're the saviors from the left. It's absolutely amazing how it works. It's brilliant. It's very simple when you talk about it basically, but with all the details I haven't exposed, you could see it's simple and complicated at the same time. So there's a situation we're in now, and without a massive awakening, we could end up losing. And if communism ever wins, it gets control. They said they're going to get rid of the police, they're going to get rid of the borders, they're going to open the borders, they're going to release people from prisons. In New York State, in the last several years, I didn't know we had 47 cop killers in our prisons. I didn't know we had 47 cop killers. Well, 47 convicted cop killers were released in prison over the last several years. The enemy knows what they're doing. Among the enemy, obviously, you have useful idiots. It's like a mafia kingpin, one of the any of the mafia families. The guy at the top is in charge. Now, all the way down street level, the low-level street guy hiding in a hallway or a bar, taking numbers, racing numbers, horse, whatever it is, gambling. That guy is the lowest level. Even though he's the lowest level, he has no inkling of the whole entirety of the mafia organization. He's still part of the mafia at the very low level. The guy selling $10 bags of marijuana, used to be nickel bags when I was a kid. The guy that's selling street heroin, cocaine, whatever, low level, $20, $30, whatever the little thing, the small amount is on the street level. That guy could be working for organized crime without realizing it. He's at the low level. So he could be in it without realizing the entirety of it. The guy all the way at the top knows the entirety of it, maybe not the minute details or the name of this guy or that guy on the corner in the street, but the entire group. This is how I describe the communist movement. There are different levels of knowledge, different levels of expertise and coordination, but the entirety of it is the communist movement. You have Communist Party officials, then you have the groups that those groups influence. Because the communists talk about changing mass moods, mass thought patterns, and mass trends. Lenin's party of a new type is crucial here. I wish Mark Levin knew this. I wish Mark Levin would listen to what I'm doing like he did in the past. Mark Levin credits me with helping him. He says he learned a lot hearing me on the Bob Grant show over the years. Mark Levin years ago told me I should write a book. Well, if I wrote a book, nobody would know, nobody would buy it. Without a big name behind it. If I co-wrote a book or did the research, ghostwrit for Mark Levin, he could sell it. 3 hours a day on radio, 2 hours Saturday and Sunday, an hour each, and then Hannity and everybody else would talk about it. When these people write books, they sell millions. How do they sell millions? You have the big platform, you have the big microphone, you have friends, everybody pushes it. So they're pushing out all these books. Mark Levin, I believe Mark Levin did his research. I believe he wrote his books. But he's never talked about Lenin's party of a new type. Marx is the philosophy or the science. Communism is the entirety of all of it. So the conservatives said we defeated communism. They were part of the communist movement. But they were useful idiots. They were unknowingly part of the communist movement. This is how people have to understand it. It's mass manipulation. It's a big mind, I can't use the four-letter word, the big mind screw that the world has ever seen. And now that some Democrats are denouncing the DSA as radical, the conservatives are already, the conservatives are laughing. They're laughing that communists are winning elections. When the show starts, they got this big dopey grin on their face. They think it's a joke. Nobody would talk about the Nazis as a joke. They wouldn't laugh at, oh, the Nazis crossed the Polish border. And yet that's how the conservative media celebrities today are talking about the socialists and communists. They think it's a joke. Now some of them are starting to worry. Hannity the other day, or let's say a week ago, actually used the C word, communist. 30 years late. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. 35 years late. How could somebody live through a storm and not see it's a storm? How could somebody live like in London during the Nazi bombings and they could maybe see fires and buildings falling and not talk about the Nazis and the bombs? You can't ignore it. And this is how the conservative media has been ignoring the communist threat. And now that they're all discredited, what do we do? What do they do? Now that the conservative media celebrities, in my opinion, allegedly, totally, absolutely discredited, now what could they do? They're laughing now how the Democrats are denouncing the radical fringe in their group. They're still not getting it. Still not understanding it. Lee, come in here. I need you.
Yes, I'm right here.
Yeah, because I like I said, I could go on for hours and hours. I don't know how long people are going to listen here. So much I didn't get to.
As long as you talk.
Well, I don't know about that. I know that 3 to 7 minutes is the average.
Yeah, and you're way beyond that.
Yeah, I know. I know.
So you're doing good.
All right.
3 times the average.
Right. So people could, if they tune out, they get tuned back in where they left off.
Anytime.
Listen, all you people listening, trust me on this. Take a chance. Listen to what I say. Maybe listen more than once. Listen to all of it. I know people who got PhDs in political science, and they're totally clueless, dangerously ignorant. I could not probably pass the test in the college that you would get a political science course. Now, my course is the actuality. There's a difference. There's the philosophy, there's interpretation. Marxism is a science, they call it, but it's also the philosophy.
Keep going, sir.
I point out sometimes the theory and strategy, but I'm tying it to the reality, because the communists are pretty open about what they do, and they like to brag. I mean, a baseball player hits a home run, he's happy, but he usually doesn't go around bragging. You don't brag. It's looked down upon when you brag, especially if you're a professional baseball player. You can't brag. You can have confidence, but you got to be kind of humble about it. The left is bragging. The communists, the Soviets, they're bragging about their accomplishments. They are so sure they're going to win. They know they're going to win. In their mind, they know they're going to win. They write that any setback is only temporary. When Marx wrote about the science, they describe it as a science, Marx found the science in Marxism, is that when civilization is formed, first you had people living, primitive people, hunter-gatherers. Eventually they banded together in groups to help hunt, help each other, and maybe for protective reasons. But eventually when you started having businesses where people were trying to make business for profit, that's the beginning of you had slavery, you had unpaid workers. Whether it was colonize a country or conquering country, every country had slaves. So those people worked, they didn't get paid. So that's the stage of slavery. Eventually it gets a little bit better. You go from slavery to feudalism. That's a little bit better. After feudalism, you go to capitalism. That's better. But at some point, they need capitalism, because only under capitalism you get full development. They know that capitalism works. Marx knows that capitalism works. He just said that the owners, the capitalists themselves, they gain most of the wealth from the ones who did the actual work. Okay, there's a little logic there. So slavery, feudalism, capitalism. Only under full developed capitalism can you go on to socialism, and then communism. So that's basic Marxism. But Marx and the communists writing about Marx said that they describe it that way because that's a clear way to understand it. But they occasionally have setbacks and downturns. But it's always going to go back to that socialism, the same thing, the same process. So they admit sometimes there's losses, sometimes there's defeats, but they're only temporary. They're so convinced they're going to end up with a full communist-controlled world government, everybody living in peace and harmony. This is why they claim the Soviet Union was never communist. They never reached the stage of communism. So there's a lot of mumbo-jumbo, but mixed in there's some stuff that has a certain logic to it. It's just not our logic. And we're in this quandary because people ignore it. Most people have their lives they're living, they work, whatever job, whatever hobby, family, kids, watching sport, whatever they do, they're trusting others to take care of the responsibility of threat assessment and national security. When the enemy influences people here that are in charge of national security and threat assessment, when those people become useful idiots because of the success of the left, you're totally blinded. And that's kind of how America is now. Now, I'm trying to make people see what other people don't see. Not that it's not there, they just don't see it. So I'm trying to blow away the clouds and the fog and make the picture clear. And now the picture should be getting clear when you see communists actually running openly for office here. So what's the questions?
Let's see here. Well, Nick, I'm not seeing your question that's above, so you're going to have to post it again. Let's see here. Do communists empty jails? Just curious.
Do they empty? I mean, where? In communist countries? He's not being specific.
Idea. Yeah, not
well,
specific enough.
in a communist country, and the communists put people in jail, the communists are not going to open those jails. But if the communists want to topple a country, they will open the jails.
Yeah.
Now, if they open the jails to let out violent criminal people that were schooled in communism because of the groups that are funneling communist literature in the prisons, because the communists also work to make total chaos. If you make total chaos in the country, it forces the government to try to impose stricter rules and laws. Then that government would be called fascist. Decades ago, the Soviets were training neo-Nazi and communist terrorists and then unleashing them in Turkey, the country of Turkey. The goal there was to have the communist and fascist, the Nazi forces fight each other to create such chaos and turmoil that the government would have to make a strong sort of a dictatorial government or authoritarian government. Then the left will say that is a fascist country, we got to topple it. So the enemy, the communist, allegedly could create a situation that creates a response, and that response later causes a counter-response. The ultimate goal is total chaos, and the solution is communist control to solve the issues, to stop the chaos, stop the violence. So they will release, like in America, they will release the prisoners. They won't even, here they're not even going to prison for the crimes.
That's very true. All right, Nick, can you put your question in there again, buddy? I am not seeing it up above. I have went back through. I can see where you said hi to people, but I do not.
Now let me also state here, after what I'm saying, always have, don't type anything into the phone. You got to get a pen or and a paper. After this is done, soldiers, all enemy shouldn't come out of the break. Hold it against the enemy. You can't officially today declare communism as the enemy because they're not pushing any longer. They're not openly pushing for armed revolution. Today, communism is considered a legitimate political party and legitimate movement. It shouldn't be, but it is. That's on technicalities.
There's another one.
Jimmy said that Marx said about race mixing. Where can I find it? I tried to look. Also, where are other references? Can I find Kami saying that? I have noticed race mixing since 2009 Obama. Well, basic Marxism. You just got to read Marx's work. Right at this minute, I can't say which publication. Marx's belief, and listen, there is a certain logic to this. Marx was against competition. Capitalism is competition. We know competition works. It builds better products, brings down the costs. Marx said it's the differences where there's nations, one nation versus another nation. That causes war. That's competition. There's religious competition. This is why you get rid of religion. You have in England, Ireland, you had the fights, the open combat sometimes between the Irish and the Catholics. Then you have the black versus the white versus the black, this country versus that country. So Karl Marx said the way to have peace and harmony throughout the world, you have to get rid of all the racial differences. So how do you do that? You mix the races. Now you don't force people to intermarry and intermingle. You just put people together and that will happen on its own. It may take decades or generations. So if you look what the Marxist goal is, open all the borders, end boundaries. So it's one world government. This is why you have a world communist movement. And each member of each group in each country is working toward that goal, whether they know it or not. If you get rid of the borders, you're going to get rid of wars, according to Marx. Because they're not going to be competing for minerals or for oil or for coal or steel. Right now you have the communist countries trying to get control. In writing, they've talked about getting control of the treasure trove of minerals that are the West life support system. But if you have one world communist government, there's no competition for the world minerals. There's no fighting over who's going to get control of the oil, who's going to get... It's going to be evenly distributed. The same with the wealth. If you get rid of companies competing with each other, countries competing with each other, if you have one race hating another race or disliking another race, or one religion against that religion, you get of all religions, because that's how people are separated. They're separated by boundaries, by philosophy, by race, by religion, by culture. So in the communist right, they want a one world communist culture. They want one world race, one world government, one world, they don't say religion, but they imply that. So when you read Marx, that stuff, you see that it's strongly implied. But then you see how it works in different countries. What are they doing in America now? When a well-known person, I won't mention the name because sometimes you're not allowed to do that, a well-known woman, major part of the communist movement, senior fellow at that group that I call tax-exempt KGB front group, because KGB people work there, when she openly stated we're going to get the changes we want largely through minorities and immigration, then a virus comes allegedly from allegedly communist country. It changes how we vote. And somebody, they open the borders. And who comes in? Third world people. That's going to affect us economically, socially, culturally, politically. You have to understand a little bit more about this and it makes more sense. Whether he actually wrote, we got to mix the races, I don't know if he actually wrote it in a couple of words like that, but when you read about, when he talks about it's the racial, religious differences, the political differences, the economic competition, the national competition, and he's talking about a world government, it's international communism, and then you get globalist groups. We had Congressman, I keep forgetting the name, one of the congressmen, the House Committee to investigate the tax-exempt foundations. He documented, totally proved, the Ford Foundation, Carnegie, Rockefeller are all pushing for world government. So that's globalist. And then the communists call themselves internationalists. So you have the globalist movement, you have the communist movement, internationalist movement. So both those movements are for totally open borders. Now, the communists were talking against religion, but being that the communists very successfully penetrated the religion, they may not now be calling for ending religion, because religion is another way to influence the masses. But in the earlier Soviet publications, and Karl Marx was against all religion. So if you get all religion, there's no religious competition. If you mix all the countries, all the races, take down the borders, everybody mixes. At some point, there's only going to be one race. Now, the globalists call that the human race. So a lot of people like their culture, they like their ethnicity. The communists say it's that competition, it's those differences that cause conflict. So the left wing in this country say diversity is strength. But when they write, they're going to use the system to destroy the system. So they're going to use their welfare system to destroy the capitalist system. They're going to use diversity to destroy diversity. If the people in Asia stay in Asia, if the people in Africa stay there, if the people in Latin America stay there, if the Europeans stay there, that's diversity, global diversity. When you mix it all and call it diversity in the countries, in the individual countries, that diversity ultimately ends diversity. Because the communists say, the Soviet publications say, they want a one world socialist culture. No borders. So if you figure, if you end all the races, end all the nation states, end all the religions, end all the economic competition, that's how you get the global government. There's no competing forces. That's when you're supposed to get full communism, global communism. I hope you understand that. I hope I explained it well enough. Since the 50s, the capitalists followed the belief of the republic.
Hold on. I might have slowed down something. Yeah. Can Jimmy one day say right there, the books you recommend is right?
Can Jimmy one day say all the books he recommends? Has he ever heard of William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse? Michael Savage did mention Jimmy 2 months ago. 2 months ago, really? I'm surprised. I hope to God we beat the commies.
What did he say?
Doesn't say what he said. I don't know.
That's what I'm asking. The person had said that Jimmy was mentioned. What did he say about Jimmy?
I haven't been on Savage in a long time, I said. Let me see here. One day, the books one of the best books. If you only get one book, if you're only going to get one book, and it's a very thick book, the book was None Dare Call It Treason 25 Years Later. Now, the book originally was None Dare Call It Treason, not One Dare Call It Conspiracy. That may be good too. I don't really know that book personally. The book None Dare Call It Treason sold like 6 million copies. But he made an update to that book, which is already old now. The updated version of None Dare Call It Treason is None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later. In that, he publishes and writes about the psychology, the psychiatrists that helped set up the radical school under Dewey, the school system we have in this country. It talks about the racial stuff. It talks about Czechoslovakia in 1948, how the communists took that over peacefully. The Soviet publications, every few years in their publications, says Czechoslovakia in 1948 is the model. A book was written by a communist on that. It's a how-to book written by the communists. It fell into Western hands, got translated into English. That book is titled And Not a Shot Was Fired by Jan Kozak. But you don't need that book. If you just get None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later, that book is covered in and summarized in the book None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later. And 25 years later, that covers whether the Soviet Union really collapsed. So it covers a lot of stuff. It's by John Stormer, so write this down. None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later. None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later by John Stormer. Now, I didn't meet John Stormer personally, but in the past, he's gone now. But decades ago, I talked to him. He sent me 2 boxes of the book, soft cover, and I sold 2 boxes of that book, None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later. I sold that at West Point. I was a featured made a speech there. I was a speaker there, at West Point about 11 months, I think it was, before the 9/11 attack by Osama bin Laden. And I was swarmed by the cadets that wanted me to autograph. Now, I'm not used to autographing anything. I didn't think I was a person people would want an autograph from. I didn't know how to sign. I wasn't going to sign my real name. I just signed it, Jimmy from Brooklyn. So there's so many people putting their hands in the face with the book, all these young cadets. None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later. You want the one that says 25 years later. Soft cover version at the time I think was like $7, I think. Maybe $5, $6. That book covers everything. Everything. And it covers some stuff from the House Committees on American Activities. It covers the race riots we had here and the communist connection to it. If you only had one book, that would be the best one in my opinion. And None Dare Call It Treason 25 years later by John Stormer. I think that is very important. It's a very thick book, but if you read that, and when I read the book, I would sometimes mark a page. I'd put a marker in the book, a paper, a little slip of paper. I would underline, I'd put an asterisk, I'd put little marks, underline certain parts. But what I do is when I find something that I didn't know, I try to find it if it correlates to communist literature. And most of the time I'm able to find it. So that book, for anybody who wants to really get it, that book is a hell of an education. You could go to school for 10 years and not know the information in that book. John Stormer was a really good guy. I think he was from Missouri. I had another friend that was a friend of his that was in Missouri that went to a Marxist Scholars Conference and reported on it. So there were good people in America. The problem is people like that, most of them got old, and a lot of them retired happily thinking we finally defeated communism, so they died and peacefully, hopefully. So a lot of the knowledge they had is gone, but a lot of the knowledge that people collected over decades is in that book, None Dare Call It Treason 25 Years Later by John Stormer. Now, anybody listening here now, you may have a question now, you can't get to it. Have a pencil and paper when I talk, write something down. You may think of a question, but there's no way to jump in and ask it. But then you could forget it. Write it down. You don't have to ask me now. Next time we do this, write it down, and you could send it in, call it in, whatever way, text it in to Lee, and it's ready for the next time. Because when I have a question, I used to go to a lot of meetings, conservative club meetings. I rarely had a question. I put my hand up during the question. To me, question and answer was the most important part of the lecture. Because a lot of the times, especially for me, I was able to get up and add to what the speaker or lecturer was stating. I could add to it or maybe correct it in some parts, but I was able to get my point out. I almost never really had a question, but I used it to either add to it, and I would go sometimes to these meetings and photocopy some communist documents to hand out to people, because I want more people to wake up. We need more people to wake up. It's not just a battle of ideas and opinions. It's a battle of getting the vote. And that's what the communists stress, shaping mass moods, mass thought patterns. We could move tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of voters. There's only one group that talks that way, works that way, and writes that way. That's the communist movement. And they work more than in the Communist Party. The Communist Party has influence to the broader masses, both on the right wing and the left wing. Let me see what other questions here. I guess Michael Savage didn't remember when he hanged up on... Oh, yeah, you remember that, yeah. He hung up on me. Now, I wonder what his opinion is now. Now, he might not know I've been denouncing the conservative media celebrities, including him, because he did hang up on me. He had Paul Craig Roberts. I don't know much about the guy, but he was kind of like pro-Putin. I don't remember the exact details. But they were taking calls, and I called up, and I got through, but Paul Craig Roberts wasn't there any longer. So I said, when Mike Savage let me on, I says, I'd like to debate Paul Craig Roberts. And then I says, you know, I'm a high school dropout, but... And as soon as I said but, Mike Savage hung up on me and said, Jimmy, you can't debate Paul Craig Roberts. He's been in government. He published whatever. You're just a high school dropout. You just said it. He cut me off. Now, if he would have heard the whole thing, what I was saying, and I said it before, I don't run from it, I'm a high school dropout, but I broke a lot of stories. I've been exposing enemy operations. I've been interviewed by various intelligence agencies. I've been able to document it. I was right, they were wrong. I went and I got my diploma. I showed up one day. I haven't been in school for decades. I showed up one day and took the test. I passed for flying colors. I was only emphasizing that I didn't have the formal education. Paul Craig Roberts, Henry Kissinger, these are highly educated people, but they're the people who got us in this mess. They're the ones who got us in this mess. So I didn't have that education, but I was right on this stuff and they were wrong. I was trying to show the contrast that sometimes you don't need the formal education. Abraham Lincoln didn't have that great a formal education, but he was self-taught. Now, I'm not comparing myself to Lincoln, but you could know a lot from life studies, your own personal studies. My interest was communism, national security, and the threat assessment. And that type of stuff you're not going to learn in school. Maybe parts of it, but I have the documents. I have secret stuff I have stuff from the Communist Party, unedited, not for publication. I have stuff a lot of other people don't have. And if Mike Savage will let me on now, but he doesn't, in my opinion, Mike Savage doesn't know what questions to ask. You have to know the subject matter to be able to ask a question that makes sense. In my opinion, allegedly, that's what we have to say these days. Let me see what else is here. I would have taken your autograph. Also, Charlotte, work is great and really good on American education. Is John Taylor Gatto. He did an amazing job, was my teacher of the year. I'm not familiar with these names. What I know, I think I know well. What I don't know, I really don't know. I had a laser focus here in what I do. What else here? I guess Michael Savage didn't remember he hanged up on Jimmy. You know, the fact he mentioned me 2 months ago, I'd like to find out what he said.
Yeah, what did he say 2 months ago? What did Michael Savage say? Do you have an idea of the date?
He said 2 months ago here.
Right, but I'm saying, do they have an idea of the date of the show so we can try to go find it?
Well, a question I got, is Lee going to have a show, live show after this?
No.
He said no. Somebody else here says, awesome information. Jimmy, what were you doing in the 60s? I asked because something you said resonated with me. What was I doing in the 60s? In the 60s, I was a little kid. I was doing things kids do. Now, mid-60s, late 60s, well, during the Vietnam War, I was going to the protests. I had a group of guys, my friends. I had a couple of Italians, a couple of Germans, a couple of Puerto Ricans, maybe 2 black guys. We go out to the protests. You had the group that lived in a place that they call the East Village now. A lot of my Ukrainian friends. We go to the protest. We didn't attack the protesters. We attacked the communists at the protest. Some of the most violent people and most violent places you could be is at a peace protest. Because you had peace protesters there carrying the Viet Cong flag, the North Vietnamese flag, and the hammer and sickle communist flag. And some of the people with the communist flag were standing with people that had the banner from the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. That was John Kerry's group. Vietnam Veterans Against the War. At the protest, they were with people and maybe even themselves carrying the communist flag. Now, John Kerry's group, Vietnam Veterans Against the War, at that time was at the same location as the National Council American-Soviet Friendship Committee. When John Kerry thought he was running for president, he referred to himself as JFK. JFK, President John F. Kennedy, was on a speedboat, the PT boat. John Kerry was in Vietnam, not on a PT boat, but a speedboat, same thing. So John Kerry thought he was going to be the second JFK. That's pretty weird. I mean, I give him credit, he was in the war, but at the end, he denounced the veterans, he denounced the soldiers, he denounced America. And his group was at the same headquarters as the National Council American-Soviet Friendship Committee. What were you doing in the 60s? That's a long story. I had different sets of friends. I played a lot of ball. I was big into stickball, every day stickball. Stickball, we had a Spalding. That was basically a tennis ball without the fuzz. And the stickball bat was like a broomstick. So it was like playing baseball, but without a hard ball and gloves. So we played pitching in, balls and strikes. We didn't cheat. We were honest. I was spoiled because when I grew up and left that neighborhood, I found that everybody cheats. I play pool, everybody cheats. If you don't watch them, they're going to cheat. Where I grew up, nobody cheated. And I thought that was the norm. Apparently, it's not the norm. Maybe back then it was, at least my neighborhood. Oh, he says here. Oh, Lee, he says here, I guess this is an answer to what you asked about Savage. He said that he hasn't heard from Jimmy from Brooklyn. Basically, I have to look. I will look. He just mentioned it, and I was shocked. So basically, he hasn't heard from Jimmy. That's what he said.
So
well, how's he going to hear from
Savage?
me?
Well, we need to contact him.
Well, he might have a web show or something.
Well, we'll contact Savage for it.
Says here, excellent analysis and education from Jimmy from Brooklyn.
And we're going to move around to the front here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, all of us who do any kind of work like this, you need some kind of feedback, because I try to be careful how I explain it. I use analogies. Sometimes I annoy people. I had some good teachers when I was a kid, and they would explain it well, give an analogy, and then ask questions to make sure we interpret it correctly, understood it. I try to do that, so if people don't like or disagree what I say, at least they know what I'm saying. That's what I strive for. So I'm glad to hear that people appreciate it. What were you doing in the 60s? Boy, I had a good circle of friends back then. My neighborhood. Now, in the early 60s, you know, we heard about the danger of drugs. Never saw it. But then out of nowhere, it seemed like overnight, there was heroin everywhere. People I know got on heroin. Guys I knew came into the neighborhood that I knew previously selling heroin. It was all over the place. Later on, we found out that during the Vietnam War, the communists had a policy of flooding drugs into America, and word spread that if you get under heroin, you won't have to go to Vietnam. That got a lot of guys to take heroin. The problem is, the war ended, the heroin didn't. Some of them died. Some of my friends recovered fully, but that's, from what I understand, that's kind of rare. But when the drugs came and then the war, we were very big, my friend, very patriotic. The guys in the neighborhood, now this is the Lower East Side, which some people, they call it the East Village. We were patriotic people. It was mostly immigrant community, second generation, maybe third generation. But there was like veterans clubs, American Legion clubs. Every couple of blocks there was a club like that. You had all these veterans. The left moved in the 60s. They moved in and they named it the East Village because they couldn't afford Greenwich Village. So these people who came in with no talent, they painted lousy pictures, they had lousy poetry, they couldn't sing, they couldn't play a guitar, but they fancied themselves as some sort of artists. And they we were when you're 12 years guys, the older guys. We were what was left of the doo-wop crowd. We were into the doo-wop, the late 50s, early 60s music. The doo-wop singing harmony in the street, it was so beautiful, so absolutely beautiful. You had the black neighborhood, you had the guys there, black, you had the Spanish, you had the Italians on 11th Street, 10th Street. Sometimes it'd be competition, friendly competition. That was the last years, I think, when they were still sort of a naive, sort of an innocence. I mean, you always had crime and drugs, you just never really saw it. The 60s is when it exploded. And that was called the counterculture. The counterculture. Now remember, the communists work in the culture. And they had this thing at Woodstock. Now, there's a history of Woodstock. I don't remember the details. Woodstock, there was big communist events there. That was known as a communist meeting place, whether it was that field or whether it were buildings. I don't remember all the details back then. But when the left, people who went to Woodstock, the concert there, those people wrote articles about it. And it's funny what they wrote, stuff that I saw firsthand, not at the Woodstock, but in the neighborhoods. Those people that went to Woodstock, by and large, the long-hair hippie type, pot, sex all over the place, multiple partners, in the mud, in the rain, doesn't matter. All of those people, a lot of those people wrote that in their neighborhoods, they were the outcasts. They were the weirdos. But then they all kind of came together at Woodstock, and they started calling it like Woodstock Nation. And that kind of helped build that counterculture movement. That's when drugs got promoted more. It was cool to take marijuana. LSD got prominent. We were the last survivors of that, my friends. Some of them, my friends, end up getting lost in it too. But we saw the change. At my age, we saw the before and after. So we saw one extreme to the next extreme. Most of the people now don't know how it used to be, so they have no way to contrast and know how it should have been and could have been, and how it isn't now. So hopefully I answered that. That was a good question, though. Savage has his YouTube videos. Here it says, Savage has his YouTube videos. I mentioned you a lot in comments along with Spotify Dynamic In-Depth. I'm 37 and hate socialism. Jimmy heard of William Cooper, who wrote Behold the Pale Horse? So that's a question. I heard of the book. I don't know much about it. What I heard is negative, but I don't trust it till I read it myself. So I really can't do an honest evaluation of the book. I didn't read it. So I won't say any more than that right now. Somebody else writes, I lost friends and family on H. I guess that's heroin. Pretty sad. Rest in peace. Yeah. That was sad, but from the enemy's point of view, it was absolutely brilliant. Because we had a Soviet defector in the late 60s, it might have been 1969, General Jan Shayner. He defected in like 69. He wrote a book. He wrote a book, Red Cocaine. It was published by another friend of mine, Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas is mentioned a lot by Jeff Nyquist and Johnny Anderson in Germany. So I just mentioned the name and I forgot it. Joe Douglas was a good friend of mine. I met him a couple of times in Washington, D.C. I used to attend what they called national security breakfasts. Now, this was not you come in a suit, you're at a big banquet hall. This was a small meeting, 4, 5, 6, 8 people, a small meeting, but these were extreme activist type people. So I got invited to that. I went to it. I met Malachi Martin, who was a devout Catholic priest who did the old Roman Catholic Mass. He also did exorcisms. Malachi Martin, some people say Malachi, I'm not sure Malachi, but I met him. I didn't know who he was at the time. Afterward, I heard his whole story. Working for the Catholic Pope, he went to Latin America and penetrated the Catholic churches there. He was a Catholic priest, but he was studying the communist influence in the Catholic Church. And he kind of said it's kind of like hopeless. The Catholic Church was totally penetrated in Latin America, particularly Nicaragua. That's the one he mentioned. And he wrote a book on it. I think it's the battle between Pope John II and Gorbachev, something like that. But that's about the strategies of Antonio Gramsci. But I also met Chris Story at a conservative club meeting. I made a statement after the speaker spoke. I raised my hand and I made a statement. I got a tap on the shoulder. It was this guy from Britain. Liked what I asked, and he gave me his card. We got in touch. I put him then in touch with Joe Douglas. And from that, the second version of Red Cocaine came out. So the first version, both written basically by the General Jan Sejno, the defector. The first book was put together by Joe Douglas. Now I put Chris Story in touch with Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas then reworked the book Red Cocaine. In my opinion, the second version is better. The version put out by Edward Harle, that's H-A-R-L-E, if my memory's correct. Edward Harle publisher. That version of Red Cocaine is better. The endnotes and the footnotes are enough for another book. So the book Red Cocaine explains the Soviet operation. The Chinese did it first. The Chinese claimed the drugs because Britain supposedly hurt China when they occupied it using heroin. I'm not sure how much of that's true, but I'm not going to argue that. It could be true. But the second version is better. So the communist goal was to flood America, any target country, with drugs. Because you're going to get young guys on drugs. That's less people to work. That hurts capitalism. And less people to fight in the military. So that's a way to defeat American youth before they're in uniform in Vietnam. But also the money, the share of the money that ends up with the communists, that money was going to fund the revolutions. And now we're finding out more about this mysterious or dark money that comes in the campaigns here. Some of that might be drug money. Now, when you have any criminal operation involving millions, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, that has corruption at every level. The banks that launder the money, you got those bank presidents, the people in the bank corrupted. The congressmen, the senators, the people who work in immigration, all of those people get corrupted. Latin America is in trouble with the drug cartels. Even though the drug cartels compete with each other and fight with each other, behind it was all set up by communists. Now, I had friends that sold drugs. They weren't communist. Some of them were good people, but money, easy money, it's hard to, some people can't resist it. Nice cars, beautiful women, don't have to work, luxury. A lot of people get tempted. Not everybody falls for it, but a lot of good people fall into it, then they're no longer good people. The drug operation was brilliant. In Vietnam, the Chinese communists, because they were the ones mainly working with the heroin at their early years, they sent it through the diaspora, the Chinese living throughout Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. So I'm not saying, I don't know if these Chinese in those countries were communist, but the Chinese people are loyal to their nation. So the Chinese communists were able to get the Chinese people who live among Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, all those countries, and funnel the heroin through that into Southeast Asia, into Vietnam, and the rest in recuperation, the bars, the bar girls, whatever. There'd be heroin, sometimes was put in cigarettes, people didn't know it. And at the end of the war, according to the American general at the time, according to quotes he made, more people died from heroin than battle in Vietnam at the end. And heroin is a potent weapon because it destroys societies. It makes enormous wealth for the criminals. It makes enormous corruption, which the enemy intelligence could utilize. And that money not only destroys us, the drugs destroy us, but the money, the communist share of it, that funds revolution and payoffs and bribery. Corruption begets corruption. So Red Cocaine by Joe Douglas, the one published by Edward Hall Publishers, is the best. Malachi Martin wrote Windswept House. That's right, Windswept. That was another good. I myself didn't read. I keep meaning to get the book. I keep forgetting about it. Windswept House. Malachi Martin was a brilliant guy. So when I was at this meeting, there was just unofficial national security breakfast. I knew he was somebody special. Some people. I met Oliver North. There are some people when you meet him. Oliver North I knew about him. I knew him somewhat. There are some people you could be with and you just know, not that you're like, oh, this guy's good looking. There's just some people you meet, you know there's something very different about him. Malachi Martin had that. His supreme intelligence, his confidence. I just knew he was somebody very special. I felt that way about Oliver North too, but I knew more about him. I met another guy like this. Oh man, I forget the name. I met another guy there. I won't mention his name for security reasons. I met another guy there at the security breakfast that actually went to Nicaragua and helped train the anti-communist military forces. So I met this guy that actually volunteered and went down to Nicaragua to train the forces fighting the communist terrorists taking over Nicaragua. Remember, the communists were so powerful, they tried to lock Oliver North up. The crime of Oliver North was basically trying to stop the communist revolution in Latin America. The communists also, when I say communists, I mean the communists working through the Democrat Party. They tried to lock up Colonel Bo Pak, the South Korean colonel, who was charged with trying to bribe American media people to do accurate and do some kind of reporting on the danger of North Korea. Because people were ignoring the communists in Latin America, they ignoring the communists in North Korea. So Oliver North tried to stop the communists. They tried to put him in jail for that. They tried to put Colonel Bo Pak, South Korean colonel, in jail. I had the honor and pleasure. I was the one that brought Colonel Bo Pak from South Korea and Colonel Oliver North together at an event in Washington, D.C., the American Freedom Coalition at the time. Two colonels trying to fight communism, two colonels who the Democrats and the media tried to put in prison. Absolutely amazing. And when those two colonels met, it was like two long-lost brothers. Imagine this. Two colonels in the military get in trouble in America for trying to stop communism in their country. Oliver North trying to stop communism in Nicaragua and trying to stop communism in South Korea. And the people I knew from the Contras. Now, I worked more with the Mosquito Indians. I had a connection to the Indians and the indigenous people, as others call them, in Nicaragua. And then there was another group in Nicaragua that were the Hispanics. Then there was another group that were like blacks. One was the one coast, one was the other. So I had some slight connection to three of them, but I worked more with the Indians. My Cuban friends worked more with the Hispanic ones in Nicaragua. So it's been very interesting. That's my hobby. Some people collect cards, collect stamps. My hobby is collecting enemy documents, and I fight for freedom. It's when you have an occasional win, it's really good. That's like hitting a home run. When I helped stop, and I'm not bragging here because I didn't do it alone. Bill Clinton had there was a guy, Anthony Lake. He was a national security advisor. Anthony Lake, L-A-K-E. Anthony Lake had worked in that group that some people say is a communist group, the Institute for Policy Studies. Allegedly, Anthony Lake worked there, and I was outing him on the radio. I was accusing him of being a communist. And anyway, Bill Clinton nominated him to head the CIA. At that point, I called a good friend of mine, Bill Jasper. He's one of the top guys at the John Birch Society. He got it out in his media. He got it out to people he's friends with in the government. Anthony Lake backed out because during his confirmation, it would have exposed the Institute for Policy Studies, and they didn't want to be exposed. I believe they told Anthony Lake to to back out of that. So it's been a lot of fun. What do you have here? Oh, do you have a email, Jimmy? I would like to send you my grandpa's W2 documentary. You could put it in the chat. You will like it. Maybe you could get it to Lee.
Yeah, I've already got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for this live with Jimmy, Brooklyn, Lee. Great stuff. Another great discussion, Lee. Jimmy, thank you for a very informative evening. Jimmy, you were on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast during the 60s, and what a time to be young. Yeah, it was very interesting. And the West Coast was really crazy, particularly in that one city in California. I keep forgetting it. Well, at that time, the Hells Angels had confrontations there, very interesting, with the protesters. He recommends Windswept House. That's a good book by Malachi Martin. We got to get that. Anyway, I'm going to give this phone back to Lee if anybody else has questions. Any other questions, write them down. Next time you get it to me, get them to Lee. We'll work through it. Thank you, everybody.
All right, guys. So that is going to do it for tonight's broadcast. There are a lot of changes going on with KLW World News. There is a lot of good news coming. Organizations to one, improve our reach, but number two, we're going to have some high caliber folks that are going to be doing interviews regularly. And so we're going to be doing some content also coming up this Sunday. Be sure to be here. This Sunday we're going to be doing a live event, and we're going to be the major media that is at that live event.
Tell them what it is.
So I'm not telling anybody yet. So we will be telling everybody once everything is nailed down and we have everything set up. But yeah, be sure to be here this Sunday. We're going to be doing a live event. And well, a lot of people that watch this channel are really going to enjoy it. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being here. Again, thank you, Jimmy, for doing the show here. We greatly appreciate that. So from all of us here at KLW World News, and oh, by the way, you got to say that disclaimer, the opinions expressed in this broadcast are the opinions of the contributors and may or may not reflect the opinions of KLW World News, any of its members or affiliates.
Or Jimmy from Brooklyn.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Now, when I said my alleged,
Hold on.